The woman in that burned photograph had been dead for 22 years. Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer recognizes her before the white K9 reaches his boots. Dawn has not yet broken over Camp Pendleton, and the base is still wrapped in a low-gray fog that smells of salt, diesel, and cold concrete. Security lights burn above the gate in pale circles, catching the drifting mist and the slow movement of a German shepherd walking out of it alone. The dog is almost entirely white, though ash has darkened the fur along his shoulders and muzzle. His paws are muddy. His breathing is tired but steady. Between his teeth, held with impossible care, is a small Polaroid photograph burned black around the edges. No one speaks at first. The Marines near the checkpoint simply watch him cross the pavement, because there is something in the way he moves that does not feel lost. He does not sniff the garbage cans. He does not search for food. He does not look at the open road behind him. His pale amber eyes remain fixed on Daniel, as if every mile he has traveled has led to this one man. Daniel stands beside the guard station with a paper cup cooling in his hand. At 36, he has learned not to react quickly to anything he does not understand. Years in uniform have trained his face into stillness. His shoulders stay square. His voice rarely rises. But when the dog comes within 10 feet, Daniel sees the half-visible face in the photograph, and the cup slips from his fingers. Coffee spreads across the concrete, dark and steaming. The woman in the picture is younger than Daniel remembers her. Her hair is pulled back loosely, and sunlight touches one side of her face. The other side has been eaten away by fire, but the gentle curve of her smile remains. So does the small silver cross at her throat. Daniel knows that cross. He once held it in his fist every night for almost a year after she disappeared. "Grace," he whispers. The name leaves him like breath in winter. The dog stops. One ear lifts. Around them, the base continues waking in distant sounds. A truck turning over, boots striking pavement, a flag rope tapping softly against a metal pole. Yet inside that small circle of light, everything becomes still. Daniel lowers himself slowly, not trusting his legs. "Where did you get that?" he asks. The K9 takes 2 more steps and places the photograph directly between Daniel's boots. Then he sits, not like a stray waiting for kindness, like a trained dog completing an order. Daniel stares at the image. His mother, Grace Mercer, vanished when he was 14 years old after a fire destroyed Haven Ridge, a search and rescue kennel outside Oceanside. Investigators searched for days. They found her damaged necklace near the rear entrance and concluded she had never escaped. No body was recovered, but time did what evidence could not. It turned absence into certainty. It taught relatives to speak of Grace in the past tense. It taught Daniel to stop looking at every woman with auburn hair in a grocery store. It taught him how to carry a question until the question became part of his bones. Now that question lies at his feet, burned around the edges and wet with morning fog. A young sentry steps closer. "Sergeant, should I call animal control?" The white shepherd turns his head toward the voice. He does not growl. He simply places one paw over the photograph. Daniel looks into the dog's eyes and sees no fear there, only exhaustion, and something that feels dangerously close to purpose. "No," Daniel says. Nobody takes him anywhere. He reaches for the photograph. The dog lifts his paw and allows it. The paper is damp and warm from the animal's mouth. A faint scent of smoke clings to it, mixed with wet fur and pine. Daniel brushes ash from the surface with his thumb. On the front, Grace stands beside a white German shepherd puppy, one hand resting between its ears. Behind her is a wooden sign, most of its lettering burned away. Only 2 words remain visible: Second Harbor. Daniel has never heard of it. He turns the photograph over. At first, the back appears blank except for soot. Then the security light catches several lines written in faded blue ink. The handwriting is narrow, slightly tilted, and unmistakable. It is the same handwriting that once labeled his school lunches and signed birthday cards with a small heart beneath the final letter. Daniel reads the message once. Then again. His chest tightens so sharply that he must press one hand against the ground. The words are simple. "Danny, do not let them send him away." He knows the picture could be old. He knows handwriting can be copied and grief can make patterns where none exist. But nobody has called him Danny since the night Haven Ridge burned. Nobody alive should know that his mother wrote her capital D with a broken curve. The white K9 rises and walks toward the eastern gate. After several steps, He stops and looks back. Fog moves around him like pale smoke. His body sways with fatigue, but his gaze never leaves Daniel. He is not asking for shelter. He is not asking for food. He is asking to be followed. Daniel closes his fingers around the burned photograph. For 22 years, he has believed his mother's last message ended in fire. Now a tired white dog has carried another one through the gates of a Marine base. And somehow, against reason, against time, against everything Daniel has forced himself to accept, Grace Mercer may be calling her son home. Daniel does not follow the dog through the eastern gate. Not yet. Training is stronger than impulse. Even when impulse carries his mother's handwriting. He raises one hand, and the sentry closes the barrier before the white shepherd can step onto the access road. The dog stops without protest. He turns, studies Daniel through the fog, then walks back and sits beside him as though the delay has already been considered. That patience unsettles Daniel more than panic would have. He slips the burned photograph inside his uniform jacket, close to his chest, and leads the animal toward an unused training yard behind the communications building. The base is beginning to stir now. Engines rumble beyond the barracks. A distant bugle call moves through the cool morning air. Marines cross the pavement carrying coffee and equipment, some slowing when they see the pale dog walking at Daniel's side without a leash. Ghostly in the fog, silent as memory. Daniel has spent most of his life learning how not to look backward, but every step toward the training yard pulls him deeper into a night he has never truly escaped. He is 14 again, standing across the road from Haven Ridge while orange light moves behind the windows. The air smells of burning pine, wet soil, and the dog shampoo his mother used in the kennels. Rain has begun to fall, but not hard enough to quiet the alarms. Grace is near the front gate, guiding two frightened dogs toward a county truck. Her auburn hair has come loose from its braid. Soot marks one cheek. Even then, she appears calm. She always becomes calmer when everyone else is afraid. Daniel remembers calling to her. He remembers the way she looks at him, as if memorizing his face. Then someone says there is one more dog in the rear kennel, a young white shepherd too frightened to move. Grace places both hands on Daniel's shoulders. Her palms are warm despite the rain. "Stay with Mr. Callahan," she tells him. "I will be right back." Daniel asks her not to go. He does not shout. That is the part he remembers most clearly. He says it softly, because somewhere inside him he already understands that begging loudly will not change who she is. Grace touches his cheek with two fingers. "No one gets left behind," she says. Then she turns and disappears through the gate. For years, Daniel hates those words. He hates them when relatives tell him his mother was brave. He hates them when the memorial plaque is placed outside the rebuilt county shelter. He hates them most on the nights when he wonders why every frightened animal deserved her return, but her own son did not. Search teams remain at Haven Ridge for 6 days. They find collapsed beams, ruined kennels, melted tags, and Grace's silver cross near a service entrance. They never find her. No body. No final answer. Only an official conclusion built from heat, smoke, and probability. Daniel is sent first to an aunt in Arizona, then to a foster family near San Diego when illness makes the arrangement impossible. By 17, he has stopped correcting people who call him quiet. By 19, he joins the United States Marine Corps because structure feels safer than hope. The memory loosens its grip as he reaches the training yard. The white shepherd enters before him and surveys the fenced space. His nose lifts toward the ocean breeze. His ears move at every distant sound, but his eyes keep returning to Daniel. "You knew her," Daniel says. The dog stands perfectly still. Daniel knows the words mean nothing by themselves. He also knows something in his voice has changed. He removes the photograph again and studies the half-burned image. Grace's hand rests between the ears of a white puppy. The animal in front of him is older, broader, marked by travel, yet the eyes are the same pale amber. Daniel feels an old thought rising, one he does not trust enough to speak. He leaves the dog with the sentry and walks 50 yards to his office. In the bottom drawer of his desk, beneath service records and an unopened birthday card, lies a small wooden box. Inside is a brass training whistle darkened with age. It belonged to Grace. Daniel has not lifted it in nearly 2 decades. When he returns, the shepherd is waiting in the exact place where Daniel left him. Daniel steps into the yard and raises the whistle to his lips. One short note cuts through the morning. The dog sits instantly. Two short notes. He lowers his body to the ground. One long note followed by two short ones. The shepherd rises, circles behind Daniel, and takes position at his left side with his shoulder aligned to Daniel's knee. It is not ordinary obedience. It is the private sequence Grace created at Haven Ridge, a pattern she once taught Daniel using hand signals, treats, and endless summer afternoons. No public training manual contains it. No stranger should know it. Daniel lowers the whistle. His hand trembles. The dog looks up at him, waiting for the next instruction. Grace, Daniel says again. The shepherd's ears lift. Then, for the first time, he makes a sound, not a bark, but a low, aching whine. He walks to the eastern fence, scratches 3 slow lines into the damp earth, and looks beyond the base toward the road. Daniel stares at the marks. His mother used 3 lines for only one message during rescue drills. One person, still alive, unable to move. The 3 lines remain in the damp earth after the dog steps away. Simple marks carrying a meaning Daniel has not allowed himself to believe. One person, still alive, unable to move. He crouches beside them while the morning wind presses cool salt air through the fence. The white shepherd watches him with quiet urgency, chest rising faster now, as though the message has cost him the last of his strength. Daniel reaches for his radio and calls the base veterinary clinic. 10 minutes later, Captain Olivia Bennett arrives in a utility vehicle with a medical bag beside her. She is 38, composed, and known across the base for treating every animal with the same respect she gives a wounded Marine. Her dark hair is secured at the back of her neck, and her calm brown eyes miss very little. She steps into the yard, takes one look at the dog, and lowers her voice. How long has he been here? Less than an hour, Daniel says. He came through the main gate alone. Olivia studies the mud hardened between his toes, the ash tangled through his coat, and the faint tremor moving along his hind legs. He did not come from nearby. She places her bag on the ground and waits for the shepherd to smell her hand. The dog gives her only a brief glance before looking back at Daniel. Olivia notices. He has chosen his point of contact. He brought a message. Daniel nods toward the marks in the dirt. He expects skepticism. Instead, Olivia kneels and examines them carefully. Search pattern? She asks. An old one. My mother used it at Haven Ridge. The dog reacts to the name again. His ears lift, and his body turns toward the eastern fence. Olivia says nothing, but her expression changes. She checks his paws first. The pads are worn and tender, marked by gravel, dry brush, and long miles of pavement. His coat carries 2 different kinds of debris. Fine gray ash lies close to the skin, while darker soot rests on the outer fur. Around his neck is a narrow line where a collar once Saturday. He has been traveling for at least 2 days, Olivia says. Possibly 3. He is dehydrated, exhausted, and running on purpose. She offers him water in a shallow metal bowl. The shepherd smells it, but does not drink. She places a small amount of food beside the bowl. He ignores that too. Daniel moves toward the gate, and the dog rises at once, nearly losing his balance before forcing his legs beneath him. Daniel stops. The shepherd stops. Daniel takes 1 step back. The dog sits again. Olivia watches the exchange. He is afraid you will leave, or that someone will move him before I understand. Daniel takes the photograph from his jacket and holds it where Olivia can see. She studies Grace's face, the white puppy beside her, and the burned remains of the sign. When she reads the message on the back, she exhales slowly. This is recent ink damage, she says. The photograph is old, but it has been exposed to moisture within the last few days. Daniel looks down at the dog. Can you tell where he came from? Not from mud alone, but a microchip might give us a beginning. Olivia retrieves a handheld scanner. The device gives no signal across the dog's shoulders. She moves it slowly along his back, then beneath the left side of his neck. A clear tone sounds. The shepherd flinches, not from pain, but from the sudden noise. Daniel rests a hand near his shoulder without touching him. Easy. The dog leans into the space beneath Daniel's palm, accepting comfort without taking his eyes off the gate. Olivia reads the number and enters it into a secure database on her tablet. While the record loads, Daniel walks to the water bowl and kneels beside it. He dips 2 fingers into the water, then lets the dog smell them. You made it this far, he says quietly. You can rest for 1 minute. The shepherd looks at him for a long time. Then he lowers his head and drinks. Not greedily. Not like a starving stray. He takes several careful mouthfuls, pauses to check Daniel, and drinks again. Olivia's tablet sounds. I have a registration. Daniel rises. What name? The dog is listed as Ghost. The name feels inevitable, as though the fog itself delivered him. Olivia scrolls farther, and the color slowly leaves her face. Daniel sees the change before she speaks. The owner is Grace Holloway, she says. Registered 6 years ago in San Luis Rey. Daniel stares at the screen. The last name means nothing, but the first name reaches through him. There is a photograph attached to the license. Olivia continues. She turns the tablet toward him. The woman on the screen is older. Silver threads run through her auburn hair. Fine lines rest around her eyes. Yet the smile is unchanged, gentle and slightly uneven, and the same small cross hangs at her throat. Daniel cannot hear the trucks beyond the yard anymore. He cannot feel the wind. For 22 years, he has imagined what his mother might have looked like if time had been allowed to touch her. Now he knows. Grace did not disappear into the past. She grew older somewhere without him. Ghost leaves the water bowl, walks to Daniel, and presses his nose against the photograph in Daniel's hand. Then he returns to the eastern fence and scratches the earth 3 more times. One person, still alive, unable to move. This time, Daniel does not question the message. Find the address, he tells Olivia. Ghost turns toward him, and for the first time since entering the base, his tail, Olivia traces the registration address to a narrow road north of San Luis Rey, 37 miles from the base, where the hills rise brown and quiet beneath the California sun. The property is listed as Second Harbor Sanctuary, a nonprofit rescue for retired working dogs, injured strays, and animals considered too old to be adopted. Daniel reads the words on her tablet without speaking. Behind him, Ghost stands at the eastern fence, his body angled toward the road, as if distance is something he can defeat by staring hard enough. Olivia makes 2 telephone calls. The first reaches an automated message. The second connects to the County Animal Services office, where a tired clerk confirms that Second Harbor exists but refuses to release private information without authorization. Daniel gives his name, rank, and the microchip number. Then he gives Grace Holloway's date of birth from the record. The line goes quiet. That date belongs to Grace Mercer, he says. She is my mother. Saying it aloud feels wrong. Not because it is false, but because for most of Daniel's life the word mother has belonged to memory, not to a living person with an address and a current driver's license. Olivia places the call on speaker while the clerk searches. Archive documents. Ghost finally leaves the fence and comes to stand beside Daniel. The dog does not touch him. He simply waits close enough for Daniel to feel the warmth of his body against the cool morning air. A file arrives by secure electronic mail several minutes later. Olivia opens it beneath the shade of the veterinary truck. The first page shows the sanctuary's entrance, a weathered cedar sign, white fencing, and rows of oak trees bending over a gravel driveway. The same words appear behind Grace in the burned photograph. Second Harbor, a place Daniel has never seen. A place where his mother has apparently built a life. More records follow. Tax forms, veterinary licenses, adoption reports, photographs from community fundraisers. Daniel looks through them one by one, each image opening a door into years that happened without him. Grace kneels beside an elderly German shepherd wearing a red bandana. Grace carries a box of donated blankets. Grace stands under Christmas lights with volunteers and 6 rescued dogs. In one photograph, she is laughing while Ghost, younger and clean, rests both front paws on her shoulders. She looks happy. Not healed exactly, but present. Alive in a way Daniel has never permitted himself to imagine. The relief comes first, warm and sudden. It lasts less than a second. Then something colder takes its place. She has been alive long enough for her hair to turn silver. Long enough to purchase property, build kennels, register a nonprofit, and teach another white shepherd the same signals she once taught at Haven Ridge. Long enough to find purpose. Long enough to find family. Yet she never found him. Daniel steps away from the tablet. The sunlight has begun to burn through the fog, revealing the clean lines of the base and the low hills beyond it. Everything appears sharper now, but none of it makes sense. 6 years, he says. Olivia closes the file halfway. That is when Ghost was registered. It does not tell us when she arrived there. She signed the forms. She attended fundraisers. She had photographs taken. His voice remains controlled, but each word carries more weight than the last. She knew her name. Ghost lowers his ears. Daniel notices and softens his tone, though not the thought behind it. She knew enough to start over. Olivia looks toward the burned photograph in his hand. A record can prove where someone stood. It cannot prove what they survived before reaching that place. Daniel turns to her. She survived 22 years. Yes. And she never called. Olivia does not defend Grace. She does not offer easy explanations about trauma, memory, or missing records. She only says, "Then there is more to the story than this screen can show us." Daniel wants to reject that. Anger is simpler than uncertainty. Anger has edges. It can be held. Hope moves like water and finds every crack. He looks down at Ghost, who is watching him with the same patient focus he showed at the gate. The dog has crossed nearly 40 miles carrying a photograph that Grace could have thrown away, burned, or forgotten. Instead, she kept it. She wrote Daniel's childhood name on the back. She placed his memory in the mouth of an animal trained to find what was missing. Daniel kneels in front of Ghost. "Why did she send you now?" The shepherd touches his nose to Daniel's hand, then turns toward the road. Olivia's telephone rings before Daniel can stand. The screen displays the number of the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. She answers and identifies herself. A woman introduces herself as Deputy Rachel Collins. Her voice is professional, but there is a hesitation beneath it, the careful pause people use before delivering news that cannot be taken back. "We received your inquiry concerning Grace Holloway and Second Harbor Sanctuary," Rachel says. "I need to know whether you are currently in possession of a white German shepherd named Ghost." Olivia looks at Daniel. "Yes, he arrived at the base this morning." The silence on the other end deepens. Daniel hears paper moving, then a slow breath. "That should not be possible," Rachel says. "Second Harbor was damaged by a fire 3 nights ago. Most of the dogs were moved safely, but Grace Holloway could not be located afterward." Daniel grips the edge of the truck. "Was she taken to a hospital?" "No, Sergeant Mercer." Rachel's voice becomes gentler. "Search teams found personal belongings inside the main building, and the county has listed her as presumed deceased." Ghost rises before the sentence is finished. A low sound passes through his chest, not fear and not warning, but refusal. He walks to the eastern fence and cuts 3 lines into the earth again. One person, still alive, unable to move. Daniel watches him, and the anger inside Daniel gives way to something older, something he thought the fire at Haven Ridge had taken forever. The need to believe his mother is still waiting for someone to come back. Deputy Rachel Collins asks them to remain at the base until she arrives, but Ghost has already made his decision. He stands beside the eastern fence, facing the road, every line of his body pulled towards something beyond the hills. Daniel wants to open the gate. Every instinct tells him that waiting is another form of surrender. Yet Ghost can barely keep his weight balanced, and whatever lies ahead will require more than faith and a tired dog. Daniel kneels beside him and places one hand against the pale fur of his neck. "We are going," he says softly, "but we are going prepared." Ghost searches his face, then lowers himself to the ground. It is the first time he has rested since entering the base. Deputy Collins arrives 25 minutes later in an unmarked county vehicle. She is 42, with sun-browned skin, steady gray eyes, and the careful manner of someone who has learned not to offer certainty before the evidence is ready. She carries a folder from the Second Harbor investigation and spreads the photographs across a table inside the veterinary clinic. The images show smoke-darkened walls, empty kennel runs, water gathered on the concrete, and the cedar sign Daniel saw in Grace's records. There is no image of Grace. Only a canvas jacket found near the office, a ring of keys, and a metal box damaged by heat. The search team checked the entire property, Rachel explains. The surrounding trails were covered as well. There was no confirmed sign that she left on foot. Daniel looks through the photographs twice. Then why list her as deceased? Rachel does not avoid his eyes. Because the fire began near the office. Her vehicle remained outside, and no one had spoken with her afterward. It was a working conclusion, not a final answer. Ghost raises his head at the sound of Grace's name, but he does not move from Daniel's feet. Olivia studies the investigation photographs while the others speak. Then she returns to Ghost and separates the fur along his shoulder with a stainless steel comb. Fine gray ash gathers on a white cloth. She repeats the process near his back, where the soot is darker and more oily. Rachel watches her place the samples several inches apart. What do you see? Two different residues, Olivia says. The darker soot likely came from Second Harbor. It carries traces of treated lumber, roofing material, and fire suppressant. The gray ash underneath is older and much finer. It smells of pine, dry earth, and mineral dust. Daniel looks at Ghost. He was somewhere else after leaving the sanctuary. Or before, Olivia says. But not long before. Some of this is still trapped close to the skin. She picks up the burned photograph using clean gloves. The front is marked by heat, but the back shows pale ripples where moisture dried unevenly. Rachel, did it rain at Second Harbor after the fire? No. The weather has been dry all week. Olivia turns the photograph beneath the examination light. Then this was exposed to water somewhere else. Fresh water, not ocean spray. There are tiny grains of red clay near the edges. Rachel studies the residue. There is no red clay around Second Harbor. The soil there is mostly sandy brown. Daniel feels the shape of the story changing. Ghost did not simply leave one fire and come to the base. He traveled through another place, somewhere wet, wooded, and marked by red earth. Somewhere Grace expected Daniel to recognize. Olivia runs her fingers carefully along the faint collar line around Ghost's neck. There is something beneath the fur, she says. She finds a narrow strip of fabric, almost invisible against the pale coat. It is not a collar, but the torn inner lining of one, fastened loosely with a small metal clasp. Ghost remains still as Olivia works it free. Inside the folded fabric is a weathered identification tag, scratched and dull with age. Daniel recognizes it before Olivia reads the name. Daniel Mercer. The tag is not from his active service record. It is older, issued during a youth training program at Haven Ridge when he was 14. Grace had ordered it as a joke after Daniel insisted on helping with every rescue drill. He lost it the summer before the fire. At least, he believed he had. His hands close around the small piece of metal, and memory returns with painful clarity. Grace fastening the tag to a cord, laughing when Daniel stood at attention beside the dogs. Every good rescuer needs identification, she had told him. He had rolled his eyes, but he wore it for weeks. Ghost carried it nearly 40 miles. Not as proof of Daniel's name. As scent. As direction. Olivia unfolds the last section of fabric. A narrow piece of paper has been sealed inside with wax. Most of the writing has faded, but 4 words remain legible. Haven Ridge. East Shelter. Below Kennels. Rachel takes a slow breath. The original property was searched after the first fire. The main buildings were, Daniel says. The East training area was closed years earlier because the ground was unstable. He looks toward Ghost. The white shepherd is standing again. His exhaustion remains, but something brighter has entered his eyes. Daniel understands now. Second Harbor was not the final destination. It was where the message began. Haven Ridge is where it ends. Outside, clouds gather over the coastal hills, turning the late morning light the color of steel. Rachel checks the weather report on her telephone. Heavy rain is expected before nightfall, enough to flood old service roads and make the abandoned property dangerous. We should wait for a county search team, she says. Daniel closes his hand around the tag. Ghost walks to the clinic door and looks back at him. She has already waited 22 years, Daniel says. I do not think we have another night. The first breath of air rising from the chamber was cool and dry, carrying the faint scent of metal, dust, and something older that Ethan Walker could not name. It did not smell abandoned. It smelled sealed, preserved, waiting. Ethan lowered the portable ladder through the opening while Dr. Melissa Grant watched the scanner in her hands. The soft pulse remained steady. No heat surge. No structural movement. No immediate danger. Still, Shadow refused to leave the threshold. The German shepherd stood with his front paws near the edge, ears forward, amber eyes fixed on the corridor below, as if he were looking into a memory. Ethan secured the ladder and tested it with his weight. I will go first, he said. Melissa looked toward Shadow. I do not think he plans to let you. Before Ethan could answer, Shadow stepped onto the first rung. Not recklessly. Not with fear. He descended with the careful confidence of a dog following a route he had traveled before. Ethan felt a quiet unease settle beneath his ribs. He followed. Melissa came last, carrying the scanner and a compact light. 6 feet below the surface, the hidden facility opened into a narrow corridor lined with pale metal panels. The walls were clean beneath a thin film of dust. Small amber lights glowed near the floor, dim but alive, drawing a path into the darkness. Their footsteps sounded too loud. Shadow's paws made almost no sound at all. He moved ahead by several feet, nose low, then lifted his head at each doorway as though checking names on invisible rooms. Ethan swept his light across the walls. Most markings had been removed, but faint rectangles remained where signs had once been mounted. Someone had not simply shut this place down. Someone had erased what it was. How long can emergency power remain active? Ethan asked. Melissa studied the scanner. With the right system, years. But these readings are too stable. Something is still maintaining this facility. A soft mechanical click sounded farther down the corridor. Ethan stopped. Shadow stopped with him. The amber lights ahead brightened one after another, not all at once, but in sequence. One, then another, like the building had noticed them. Melissa lowered her voice. That did not happen automatically when the door opened. Ethan looked back at her. You are certain? Yes. The silence that followed felt alive. Shadow turned toward a doorway on the left. Unlike the others, it was partly open. A strip of darkness divided the frame. The dog approached slowly, then pressed his nose against the gap. His breathing changed. One short inhale, a pause, then a faint whine escaped him. It was the first vulnerable sound he had made since entering Camp Ridge 12. Ethan moved beside him and eased the door wider. The room beyond was small. Rows of empty stainless steel kennels lined both walls. Folded blankets rested on narrow shelves. Water bowls sat dry beneath faded identification plates. No animals remained. Yet the room carried traces of them in the worn floor, the scratches near the lower doors, and the silence left behind when living things had been removed too quickly. Shadow entered alone. He walked past the first kennel, then the second, then stopped at the fourth on the right. The door hung open. Inside lay a frayed red collar coated with dust. Ethan crouched and lifted it carefully. A small metal tag rested beneath the buckle. Most of the engraving had been scratched away, but one word remained clear beneath the beam of his light. Shadow. Ethan did not speak. He looked at the dog, then at the collar, and understood why every turn had felt familiar to him. Melissa stepped closer, her expression losing its professional distance. He was kept here. Shadow lowered his head and touched the tag with his nose. For several seconds, he remained perfectly still, not frightened, not confused, remembering. Ethan placed one hand gently against the dog's shoulder. Beneath the thick, dark fur, he felt a tremor pass through him. You came back, Ethan whispered. Shadow leaned into his touch, but his eyes shifted toward the rear wall. There, almost hidden behind the last kennel, a narrow maintenance door stood closed. A pale green light glowed above it. Then came a sound from the other side. Soft, uneven, barely more than breath against metal. Melissa raised the scanner. The display changed instantly. One living heat signature appeared beyond the door. Small, weak, but unmistakable. Ethan stared at the reading while Shadow stepped forward and placed one paw against the metal. The dog did not bark. He only waited, as though he had crossed all those silent miles for this single door. Ethan grips the maintenance door handle, but Shadow places his paw over the Marine's boot before he can turn it. The gesture is gentle, deliberate, a warning, or perhaps a request. Ethan lowers his light and listens. Beyond the metal comes another faint sound, followed by a pause so long that Melissa checks the scanner twice. The heat signature remains. Small, weak, alive. Shadow presses his nose beneath the door and draws in a slow breath. His ears soften. The rigid line of his back loosens, and a sound rises from his chest, not a growl, not a whine, but something low and aching, like a name remembered in sleep. Ethan kneels beside him. You know who is in there. Shadow does not look away from the door. Melissa studies the control panel mounted beside the frame. Dust covers the buttons, but one narrow screen still glows. The lock is tied to the emergency system, she says. I can open it, but the power reading is unstable. Ethan glances toward the corridor behind them. The amber floor lights flicker once. Then again. How much time? Maybe 10 minutes before this section shuts down. Maybe less. Ethan places his palm against the cold metal. On the other side, something shifts. A soft scrape. Then silence. Open it. Melissa removes the panel cover and connects 2 wires from her scanner. The screen flashes red. Shadow steps closer until his shoulder touches Ethan's knee. Melissa tries again. This time, a green line moves slowly across the display. The lock releases with a tired mechanical sigh. Ethan pulls the door inward. Cold air slips through the opening, carrying the smell of old blankets, clean water, and living breath. The room is no larger than a storage closet. A single emergency lamp burns above a low medical enclosure. Inside lies a German shepherd, smaller than Shadow and much older. Her sable coat has faded silver around the muzzle. One ear bends gently at the tip. A thin blue blanket covers her body, and a clear water line runs from a small wall reservoir to a dish beside her. She lifts her head less than an inch. Her clouded brown eyes find the doorway. Then, they find Shadow. The old dog's tail moves once against the blanket. Shadow freezes. For a moment, even the machinery seems to hold its breath. Then he crosses the room. Slowly, reverently, he lowers himself beside the enclosure and touches his nose to the narrow opening near her face. The old shepherd breathes him in. Her eyes close. A soft sound leaves her, fragile and relieved. Shadow answers with the same low note he made at the door. Melissa covers her mouth. Ethan feels something tighten behind his ribs. He has heard Marines speak after years apart. He has watched families meet at airport gates. But this reunion has no language, only scent, breath, and the quiet certainty that love has survived where records did not. Melissa checks the identification plate beneath the enclosure. Most of the letters are faded, but one line remains visible. Canine Rehabilitation Subject. Name Grace. Ethan looks at the red collar still looped around his hand. Shadow's name. Grace. 2 dogs hidden beneath a camp that officially never housed them. How long has she been here, he asks. Melissa studies the reservoir, the automatic feeder, and the monitoring lights. Someone has kept this system running. The supplies are recent. Weeks old, not years. Ethan scans the room. On a shelf above the enclosure sits a paper logbook sealed inside a clear pouch. He reaches for it, but Shadow suddenly turns toward the corridor. His ears rise. The floor lights outside go dark one by one. The distant ventilation hum fades. Melissa looks at her scanner. Power is dropping. Ethan lifts the latch on Grace's enclosure. Can she walk? Melissa gently examines the old dog without forcing her to move. Not far. She is dehydrated and weak, but her heart is steady. Ethan removes his field jacket and spreads it on the floor. Together, he and Melissa slide Grace onto the fabric, careful and slow. Shadow stays beside her, his body curved protectively around hers. When Ethan lifts the jacket like a sling, Grace's head settles against his arm. She weighs less than he expects. Too little for a dog her size. Yet when the corridor falls completely dark, her eyes remain fixed on Shadow. Ethan turns on his flashlight. We are taking her home. Shadow steps forward, then stops beside the shelf. He looks up at the sealed logbook. One sharp bark breaks the silence. Ethan follows his gaze and takes the book. Beneath it lies a small photograph. 2 young German shepherds sit side by side beneath the Camp Ridge 12 sign. One wears a red collar. The other wears blue. On the back, written in faded ink, are 5 words. They always find each other. Ethan slips the photograph into the logbook and secures both beneath his shirt. The corridor beyond the room is almost black now. Only Melissa's scanner and the narrow beam of his flashlight remain. 2 fragile pieces of light surrounded by steel and silence. Grace rests inside the jacket sling against Ethan's chest. Her breathing is shallow, but steady. Shadow walks so close beside him that his shoulder brushes Ethan's leg with every step. He keeps looking back at Grace, counting her breaths the way she once must have counted his. Melissa leads them toward the ladder. The main system is gone, she says. The entrance mechanism may already be locked. Ethan does not slow. Then we find another way. Behind them, a heavy door closes somewhere in the facility. The sound rolls through the corridor like distant thunder. Shadow stops and turns. His ears rise. A second door closes. Then a third. Not random. A sequence. The The passage is sealing itself. Melissa looks at the scanner. Someone activated the containment protocol. From where? Not from inside this section. Ethan feels Grace stir against him. Her head lifts weakly, and her nose turns toward a narrow side corridor they passed only minutes earlier. Shadow notices. He gives one short whine and steps toward it. The ladder is the other direction, Melissa says. Ethan looks at the darkness behind them, then at the dogs. They know this place better than we do. They follow. The side corridor slopes gently upward, its floor rougher than the polished hall behind them. Dust thickens along the walls. Old pipes run overhead, carrying the occasional click of cooling metal. After 20 feet, the passage ends at what appears to be a blank wall. Shadow approaches the lower right corner and paws once at a faded panel. Grace answers with a faint breathy sound. Ethan kneels and wipes away the dust. Beneath it is a small painted symbol, 2 paw prints inside a circle. Melissa studies the edges. Emergency animal evacuation route. Ethan presses the panel. Nothing happens. He tries again. Still nothing. The doors continue closing behind them, each one nearer than the last. Melissa shines her light along the frame and finds a recessed manual lever 6 inches above the floor. It is stiff with age. Ethan sets Grace down gently beside Shadow, grips the lever with both hands, and pulls. For a moment, it refuses to move. Then the mechanism gives with a deep metallic groan. The wall opens inward, revealing a narrow concrete tunnel filled with cold night air. The scent of pine enters first, then rain. Shadow steps through and looks back. Ethan lifts Grace again. Melissa follows, and together they move through the tunnel while the hidden panel closes behind them. The passage is barely wide enough for one person. It rises for nearly 40 yards before ending beneath a rusted storm grate. Rainwater drips through the openings and darkens the concrete. Ethan pushes upward. The grate lifts 2 inches, then catches on something heavy. Melissa braces beside him. Together, they force it aside and climb into the woods beyond the eastern fence of Camp Ridge 12. The night has deepened. Wind moves through the pine branches, carrying the clean smell of wet earth. Their vehicle sits almost half a mile away on the other side of the abandoned camp. Ethan checks Grace. Her eyes are open, but unfocused. Melissa places 2 fingers against her neck. She needs fluid soon. Shadow presses his nose to Grace's muzzle. She does not respond. He nudges her again. Nothing. Ethan kneels beneath a cedar tree and lowers her onto the jacket. Rain taps softly against the leaves above them. Melissa opens her medical bag, finds a small emergency fluid pouch, and prepares the line with practiced hands. Shadow lies beside Grace, his body shielding hers from the cold ground. Ethan watches the old shepherd's chest. It rises once, then remains still. Melissa. She leans closer. The forest seems to fall silent around them. Even the wind pauses. Melissa listens, checks again, then lowers her eyes. Shadow does not move. He places his head against Grace's neck and closes his eyes. Ethan feels the weight of the logbook beneath his shirt, filled with names, dates, and reasons someone tried to erase. None of it matters in that moment. Not the hidden facility. Not the sealed records. Only a dog who crossed years of darkness to find another soul, and may have arrived one breath too late. Ethan reaches down and rests his hand over both of them. "You found her," he whispers. Shadow opens his eyes. Then Grace's front paw moves. Barely an inch. Her toes curl into the wet earth. Melissa freezes. A thin breath enters Grace's lungs, trembling but real. Shadow lifts his head. The old shepherd opens one clouded eye and looks at him. Her tail touches the ground once. Ethan bows his head as rain slips from his hair and runs across his face. No one speaks. Some answers do not come through alarms or machines. Sometimes they arrive as one small breath in the dark, after everyone has already prepared to say goodbye. Grace draws another breath, thin and uncertain, then a second that reaches deeper into her chest. Melissa bends over her with the fluid line steady between her fingers, listening as though the entire forest has narrowed to that fragile rhythm. Shadow remains beside the old shepherd, his nose resting against her cheek. He does not whine now. He waits. Ethan has seen that kind of waiting before, in hospital corridors and beside field radios, when hope is too delicate to speak aloud. Her pulse is returning, Melissa says. Weak, but regular. Ethan exhales slowly. He had not realized he was holding his breath. Rain slides from the cedar branches in silver drops, gathering on Grace's faded coat. Ethan pulls off his overshirt and lays it across her body, leaving only her head uncovered. Can we move her? We have to. Melissa secures the fluid pouch inside her medical bag and keeps the line attached. Carry her level. No sudden movement. Ethan lifts Grace in the jacket sling while Melissa holds the bag above her shoulder. Shadow rises and walks beside them. The half-mile to the vehicle feels longer in darkness. Mud grips Ethan's boots. Wet branches brush his face. Grace weighs almost nothing, yet each step carries the heaviness of years stolen from her. Every few yards, Shadow looks up at Ethan, then back at Grace, making certain both are still there. When they reach the camp's eastern edge, Ethan stops. A pair of headlights glows through the trees near the main access road. They are not his. The lights remain still for several seconds, then begin moving slowly along the abandoned fence. Melissa lowers her voice. Someone knows we entered. Ethan turns away from the road. His truck is parked beyond a maintenance trail nearly 200 yards west. Stay close. They move beneath the tree line, using the rain and darkness as cover. There is no panic in Ethan's pace, only purpose. Grace's breathing remains soft against his arm. Shadow moves ahead now, choosing the clearest ground without being told. At the truck, Melissa opens the rear door and arranges blankets across the seat. Ethan places Grace down gently. Shadow climbs in after her and settles with his body against hers, giving her warmth without pressing too hard. Grace opens her eyes. For the first time, they seem to focus. She looks at Shadow, then at Ethan. Her gaze lingers on him with a strange calm, as though she recognizes not his face, but the promise behind it. Ethan closes the door and takes the driver's seat. Melissa climbs in beside him, still holding the fluid pouch above the center console. The engine turns over. Behind them, the unfamiliar headlights reach the maintenance trail. Ethan does not look back again. He drives towards Cedar Ridge Veterinary Hospital, 26 miles south, following a county road that bends through the mountains. The rain begins to weaken. Clouds separate above the distant hills, revealing a pale strip of moonlight. In the back seat, Shadow keeps his head across Grace's front paws. She rests her muzzle against his ear. Neither dog sleeps. Melissa opens the logbook beneath the glow of the dashboard. The first pages contain feeding records, medical notes, and training evaluations. The handwriting changes over the years, but two names appear again and again. Shadow and Grace. They were paired as young dogs, Melissa says. Search work, scent recognition, emotional recovery. Ethan keeps his eyes on the road. Recovery for whom? Melissa turns another page. Her expression changes. For each other. The notes describe Grace as patient and steady, able to calm Shadow after loud noises and long separations. Shadow is listed as protective, unusually alert whenever Grace's health declines. Near the middle of the book, a final entry is written in darker ink. The program is ordered closed. Shadow is transferred. Grace is declared unsuitable for relocation because of age and chronic illness. No destination follows. Only one sentence. Care will continue off record. Ethan grips the steering wheel. Someone stayed behind for her. Melissa nods. And someone recently stopped. She turns to the last completed page. The date is only 9 days old. Beneath it are 4 words. Forgive me. They found us. A quiet sound comes from the back seat. Grace lifts her head and places one paw over Shadow's. He looks at her. The old shepherd's tail moves once beneath the blanket. Then she makes a sound so soft Ethan almost mistakes it for the tires on wet pavement. A single low note. Shadow answers. Melissa closes the logbook. Outside, the first lights of Cedar Ridge appear between the pines. Ethan feels the night shifting around them. They have not escaped the truth buried beneath Camp Ridge 12. They have carried it out. And in the back seat, 2 dogs once separated by human decisions breathe side by side, proving that memory can survive locked doors, erased names, and years of silence.